sometimes people don't do is choose this as a career because perhaps they have introverted tendencies. And I would say that's a mistake. I think introverts and extroverts both can be wildly successful in this field. And sometimes, the introverts bring to the table things that extroverts cannot bring to the table. Reflection, an inward journey, a study of others. And I would say the point of deciding whether this could be a career or not is if you can suspend that ego and recognize it's not really about me.
Today's episode of the ProGuide is brought to you by Small Pond Productions, the producers of this podcast. If you're looking to boost your brand's voice with professional end-to-end podcast production, whether it's an interview show or telling stories with audio, we walk you through every step of the process to make you sound great. Head to our website and download the free Podcasting Made Simple guide. 8 critical things you need to know before launching your brand's podcast. It's all available at smallpond.productions. Well, welcome everybody to this episode of the ProGuide, where we interview thought leaders in business, technology, creativity, and productivity. And today I am so honored to be able to hang out with Vince Varallo. Vince is the head of Lead in English and helps people identify their unique communication strengths and challenges so that they can build confidence and overcome any self-doubt. His keynote speeches, workshops, and coaching sessions receive high praise from KPMG, Prudential, EY, Bank of America, and many more. And he's the co-author of Leading in English, How to Confidently Communicate and Inspire Others. A really great read for anybody who happens to be a professional working in English. And Vince, so excited to hang out with you for a few minutes today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew, thanks so much. When you invited me last week, I was very excited by the opportunity. I'd been looking forward to it.
And it's our honor to be able to just kind of hang out and find out more about what led you down this path. It's such a unique career path. And I'd love it if you would just kind of crack open the shell a little bit and tell us a little bit more about what led you down this path to help others confidently communicate in English.
Yeah. And when I started, I'm not so sure I had the confidence to get started. That was built over the years. It really wasn't a game plan that I had set out. When I went to Southern Illinois University for my master's degree, they had a relationship with the Malaysian government, and they invited the graduate students. I was an English major going for my master's in English. They invited us to help tutor, and they called it ESL, which was new to me at the time, English as a second language. So, while I was going for my studies, I had an opportunity to just help folks one-on-one. And it was there that I started to notice people really struggled as they were coming into English as a second or third language. And a lot of it, sometimes it had to do with language, but oftentimes it had to do with performance confidence and just being able to get out there. So that's really where I started. And then my first job, go guess, out of graduate school was teaching English as a second language at a business school. And there were 300 students in that business school, but I was in that ESL division, and I was on the job for 1 month. And I'll never forget this. And the woman who was directing the school called me into her office. I was like, oh no, I'm going to the boss's office. Here we go. Oh boy. And she said, I want you to know that I'm doing this job as a favor to the owner, and I really want to retire. Would you like to become director of this school? It's like 1 month on the job. I was like, exactly. Just, whoa. So I said, sure. And then I met my future partner there, and we put together a game plan. And way back, so many years ago, we started a language institute and ran that for 12 years. And so happy I was able to meet all the payrolls as they came in. That's one of the highlights. Anybody who runs a business will tell you meeting payrolls every week for a 10-year period is an exciting thing. And from there, just really spiraled out into my own consulting practice for Rallo International and now Lead in English. So that's how it got started.
I love to hear this movement of something that shows up as so organic. I honestly, before we started talking, I was curious whether there was just a day where a switch flipped and you're saying, I wasn't coaching people and today I will, and trying to have to work your way through that. But it sounds like it was a really really organic process as it went through.
I give you two examples, and one of the things we're really trying to encourage people to do is kind of share their story a little bit, their narrative. Two things happened to me that really had an impact on my career. The first was I was the captain of a state championship football team in high school. And because I was the captain, they asked me to give a speech to accept the award of state champions for the whole team. I was mortified and petrified. And I promise you, I gave that 5-minute speech or whatever, and I could tell you that it probably was the worst speech on the planet Earth. And I felt terrible. And people came up to me at the end of it and said, Vince, that was terrific. Wow, way to go. It was like,
Okay.
oof. So first lesson is what I'm feeling is not necessarily what they're seeing. So I
True.
kept that in the back of my head. And then back to graduate school, I was a teaching assistant. We taught our own writing classes. And I was teaching Composition 101. And eventually you get observed by somebody from the department. And of course, I wound up getting the director of the department to come and observe me. And I taught that class in front of college students, and I wasn't much older than they were. And once again, I just simply felt like this was a disaster. And it wasn't perfect, but the review came in from the director, and he said, public speaking will always be a part of what Vince does. I can see it in his career. And that was, whoa, okay. And that was a foundational piece that probably kept me wanting to be up in front of groups.
There's, hearing you say that, there's a sense where there's almost a borrowing of somebody else's belief that you can stand on top of until you kind of really get rolling with that confidence piece there. Was there ever, does that still happen for you? Even after this many years, is there ever a time where you really do feel, the butterflies show up for you? Or is it pretty much, you know what, I think I've had enough reps in. I feel like we're okay now.
Well, here's my take on it. If you don't get the butterflies, it's a problem. It means I have found myself, when that happens, to be overconfident. And so I look for the butterflies. And as you know, we work closely with people who have a fear of public speaking. They have anxiety about public speaking. And one of the things we try to work with people is those butterflies, that's your energy source. So start thinking of it as an energy source. And of course, the first reaction is, yeah, sure, right. I'm just nervous and my voice is shaking. But once that mindset shift can happen, you're looking for it. So to answer your question very specifically, I still get the butterflies. I look for the butterflies. And I am a preparation fanatic. I like to prepare. Fair enough. And I encourage, of course, my participants all believe in preparing. But there's a point in time, too, when you have to do this in an impromptu basis. And that is really a launching point for success for many of the folks who come through our programs.
I feel like you've already answered a little bit of what I was going to say is my next question about what do you do when somebody maybe comes to you with an emergency, either, gosh, Vince, I just bombed and I don't know what to do. And they're in that mental space where they're spiraling a little bit. Or, hey, I see this coming and I'm not prepped for it, or I'm just don't see how I will be prepped for it. And I'm nervous about this. So definitely the butterflies as an energy source. Any other thoughts around that for when somebody just is in that space that's kind of looping in their head?
Yeah, one of the things we just talked a little bit about is that what you're feeling is not what they are seeing, which is a liberating concept. And it really is. The second thing is when somebody comes and says, my career is on the line. And we do get that. We get the idea that my next performance will, enable me to get this promotion or not. And really kind of what we're encouraging people to do is check their self-beliefs. Was it really a bomb? And maybe the answer is yes. I'm not saying that, but there's a moment in time when you kind of put yourself through that filter. And, we're our own worst critics, especially when it comes to public speaking. And similar to the two examples I gave to you where I felt like I totally bombed, those participants, we kind of help build them back up. And also, because we work with people in business, there's only two areas that I think are important. Two criteria. One, was it memorable? Did you create something memorable? And two, when they left, did they talk about it a little bit and did they share? And there's nothing else you need to do. You and I are in a field where we're out there in public and there's a certain energy that we have to have. Many of these business people, if they just hit those two marks, was it memorable? One, and second, did people kind of share and talk about it and participate? And if you've hit those two marks, you've check off the box.
I love that idea of a lasting impression being a marker for whether or not somebody, has this feeling of like, yeah, it hit, it was successful. What advice do you have for somebody who is maybe trying to decide whether or not a career in either communication or something that's public facing is for them? Do you have any markers as to like, hey, this might be a good indication that you're headed in the right direction, or maybe here are some red flags that, this might not be necessarily for you?
Yeah, and of course, much of the work that we do is with international professionals, people working globally. And many years ago, I was brought in as a consultant working for a Korean company in northern New Jersey. And the assignment was, can you help us create a profile of a U.S. American who would be successful in relocating to South Korea? So it was like, sure. I mean, I was a young consultant. Why? Let's
Okay.
go. And listen, Andrew, I promise you, when the assignment was over, we gave them the healthy deliverable consultants will do, a nice, beautiful report with layers upon layers. But it really came down to two things. And when I say this, it's like I remember my kids would go, well, duh, Dad. And the two things were, do you communicate well domestically? And if you do, you will be a wild success. And if you don't communicate well domestically, you'll be a miserable failure when you go
Wow.
to other countries. So communication starts there. But your question is people maybe thinking about a career in this. And one of the things I would say, I'll answer that in a different direction.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't do is choose this as a career because perhaps they have introverted tendencies. And I would say that's a mistake. I think introverts and extroverts both can be wildly successful in this field. And sometimes, the introverts bring to the table things that extroverts cannot bring to the table: reflection, an inward journey, a study of others. And I would say the point of deciding whether this could be a career or not is if you can suspend that ego and recognize it's not really about me. It's about them. And what do they need, and can I help them accordingly? So
Such good advice. That's such good advice. I was interviewed a little while ago for somebody asking about like, how do you interview people on podcasts? And such a similar answer to just this awareness that it's not just you and me having a conversation right there, but there is another person whose vested interest we have in keeping this communication going and keeping it engaging for them. What would you say, as you look back, is there one or are there multiple aspects that you would consider to say that's really the most rewarding part of the work that I get to do, whether it's just the light bulb moment or just a series of things? Is there something that you could point to and say, when I see that happen in an individual I'm coaching or as I'm kind of giving a keynote, that for me is the magic?
yeah, and that light bulb analogy, I'll share with you, because we work with professionals, I'm very careful. The light bulb is already on. It's already on. And the question is, can we help it shine brighter? And I just had a participant come through the program. And yes, I get this quite a bit, where the reflection of how you can improve yourself from a communication standpoint, it has to do with tactics, it has to do with strategies. But there's this moment of transformation, which just the individual realizes that I can do this. And I actually oftentimes realize that individual has been able to do this. And it's just that self-recognition that comes from that. that really is rewarding. The other thing I'll share with you too for this phase, this kind of new phase in my career as I'm going through, is that I also feel a wonderful sense of purpose in helping people articulate their ideas, because oftentimes the professionals we work with lack confidence in sharing their voice, whether it be because they're working in English as a non-native language or whether they are native speakers of English and just kind of pull back a little bit. I think their voice is sorely needed in today's world. I think we have a divided world. People are very divisive. And I think if we could add that professional, highly intellectual voice into the mix, it'll help people kind of bridge those divisions just a little bit. And I feel like I can make a difference in the world by working with individuals in this capacity.
That's such a cool thing, getting to be able to help people to see what's already there and just recognize it. Like you said, the light bulb's on, just helping to turn up the wattage a little bit so it shines brighter. I think that's a beautiful analogy. That's really cool to see. If you had a billboard, or if you had, the magic wand that waves it, I do something and suddenly everybody kind of gets this one concept as it pertains to either communication in English or your career thus far. Is there one thing that you just kind of really wish everybody would get?
Boy, that's hard to boil it down to one thing.
Feel free to pick one if there's not a front runner.
Yeah, I think two things: engagement and connection. And, because people can become very nervous about communicating, and sometimes people are more comfortable one-on-one than they are in groups, but other times not. But my thought process there is if you can create a sense of connection with those people that you're communicating with, it seems like such an easy thing for me to say. But the number of times I am out in public and I watch people have conversations, they're not conversations, they're separate monologues oftentimes. I'm saying this, then I'll say this. I'm saying this, and I'll say this. And then they walk away from each other and they don't know anything about each other. So I'm really, encouraged by people who can make those connections. And I think that's the it factor. The it factor is really if you can get people to come into you and you can come out to them and create an environment where connection and engagement is encouraging. Easy to say, not necessarily easy to do.
It's a really well thought answer. I love that idea of not just because, so many of us have heard, Covey's seek to listen before seeking to be understood. And yeah, it's simple. It is simple, but do we do it? I know for me, the internal dialogue is running, 1,000 words, per minute and just waiting to say the next thing that shows up in the conversation and to be able to really hone in and say, do I even remember what the other person was saying from, short-term memory? I guess one more question and then
Sure,
we'll
go
let you
ahead.
run. And that is, I love to find out, when we interview people, not only just the path they've taken, but kind of what is front of mind for them. And for you, is there anything that you would say currently is inspiring to you? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, but can be a book, a talk, a podcast, a resource, or just an idea that maybe it was an old idea, but you've rerun across it and you don't even necessarily know what to do with it yet, but it's just like, there's something there for that. And I don't know what to make of it, but here it is.
I obviously with my degrees in English and American literature and world literature, I think part of my process is to embrace what I call a renaissance of learning for professionals working. And with my background, I'm working with technical people. I'm working with scientists. I'm working with accounting folks. And I'm working with people who have a very different background than I have. And while I love the concept of keeping up with all the latest business books and The old definition of a good consultant is one book ahead of the client. I kind of get it. I really encourage people to read poetry, to read literature, to read fantasy novels, to expand the horizons of the thought process. It's good for articulation. It's good for communication. It's good to create, kind of critical thinking skills, not just from the MBA perspective, but perhaps also just from the worldview and the great literature that's out there. And I think people sometimes are afraid to make that analogy for business folks. That you should be reading poetry, you should be reading great literature, you should be reading fantasy novels. And so I'll take the stand here and say that's a great thing for people to be doing. And what happens is participants ask me that question, I'll throw a couple of different things at them and they'll go out and read it. Say, that was great, good stuff. So, we're living in a day and age where I think reading is equally important. And with AI taking over the writing skills for so many people, nothing wrong with that. Great tool. Wouldn't play the game of, well, I'm afraid of it. But we also have to be careful not to lose our soul inside there. We're expressing ourselves. Whether it be in business or whether it be socially. So that would be my take.
It's fantastic. Love the thought process, Vince. This is, it's been a great conversation. Kind of when you have a real person in front of you. So I so appreciate that you've been kind of present with us as we've talked through this. How can folks, if they're interested in finding out either more about what you're up to or engage with you about, communicating competently in English, how can they do that?
Well, thank you for asking that. They can always reach out to me anytime. Probably the best would be the website, mcin.net. MCIN stands for Mastering Clarity, Impact, and Narrative. That's the framework we use to help people become stronger communicators. So that would be the best case scenario for them to reach out. And at the point in my career too, where dialogue is equally as important as closing business deals. So anybody who wants to share any thoughts or want to pick my brain for anything, I spend a good part of my day doing that.
It's fantastic. Vince, we so appreciate having you on here. Thanks for joining us today.
What a great opportunity, Andrew. Thank you so much.
And our thanks to all of you for listening. If you're looking for a quick way to make our day, a review in iTunes or subscribing to this podcast would mean the world to us. Our thanks to Small Pond Productions for sponsoring. And this was the ProGuide. Learn from leaders, change your life. See you, everybody.